Dominic Reeves did not read everything that came to him. That was not negligence. It was discipline. His phone received on an average day between 60 and 90 messages across various channels. His email inbox was managed by a system he had designed himself, which filtered, flagged, and archived with the efficiency of a second mind. His assistant, a capable woman named Therese, handled the rest. He was 45 years old, and he ran a commercial property development firm that had restructured entire city blocks in 3 different metropolitan areas. He was not a man who made small decisions. Everything he touched was large, and therefore everything required his full attention, which meant that his full attention had to be protected. He had been called difficult. He had been called cold. He had been called by one journalist who had interviewed him once and never been granted a second opportunity, a man who had mistaken efficiency for living. He had read that description and found it more accurate than insulting. His apartment was on the top floor of one of his own developments. It was clean and quiet and ordered the way he liked the inside of his mind. His mornings began at 5:30 and followed a pattern so established it barely required thought. Nothing important came without announcement. Nothing arrived that Therese hadn't cleared. He was, in this way, completely insulated, or so he believed. Tuesday was a meeting day. He had 4 scheduled and one that arose from the first, which always happened on Tuesdays. Something in the rhythm of the week produced these small collisions. He managed them without friction. The morning started with his development team, site updates on 2 active builds, a cost projection that needed revision, and a contractor issue in the Eastern project that had been escalating quietly for 2 weeks and now needed a firm resolution. He gave it 1. By 11, he was in a different room with a legal team and a planning document that should have been finalized 3 weeks earlier. It was not a comfortable meeting. He was not concerned with comfort. Lunch was 20 minutes. He ate at his desk and used the remaining time to review a presentation his acquisitions director had sent. The afternoon was a call with investors, followed by a site visit to a property they were assessing on the south end of the city. He walked the space with his surveyor, asked the questions the surveyor expected him to ask, and several he didn't, and was back in the car by 4:30. His phone had collected messages throughout the day in the background, and the way it always did. He looked at the notification count on the drive home. 43. He would read the flagged ones. Therese had marked 6. The rest he would clear tomorrow. The message arrived at 6:48 in the evening. He was home by then, jacket off, making coffee, the day transitioning into the quieter hours he used for reading and thinking. His personal phone, separate from the work device, was on the counter. It buzzed once. He glanced at it. Unknown number. Not entirely unusual. Sometimes clients or contacts used personal numbers when they couldn't reach his office line. He picked it up. The message was not long. Dominic, I know you don't know this number. My name is Grace Okafor. I am Adaizi's mother. I don't know if you remember her. It's been a very long time. I'm not writing to cause any trouble. I'm writing because I think you should know some things. I hope you'll read this. Grace. He read it once. Adaizi. The name moved through something, not memory exactly, but the place where memory had been. A shape without the detail around it. He set the phone down. He poured the coffee. He did not read it again. The name continued to move through that place in the back of his mind. Not loudly, not demandingly. Just present, the way a sound continues after the source has stopped. He carried the coffee to his desk. He opened the reading he had set aside for this evening. The phone stayed on the counter. The message did not have the shape of urgency. He had seen urgent messages enough times to know what they looked like. They had a quality of compression, of too many words trying to get out at once. Of the sender's distress, visible in the sentence structure itself. This was not that. I don't know if you remember her. That was a patient sentence, a sentence written by someone who had thought about what to say. I'm not writing to cause any trouble. That was the kind of thing people said when they had something to say and needed you not to be afraid of it before you heard it. He registered all of this, the way he registered all information, automatically, in passing, without deciding to. He was not going to respond tonight. He was not going to respond tonight because tonight he had a planning document to finish reading and 3 emails to draft, and he had already used his reserves of careful attention. Whatever Grace Okafor had to tell him about a daisy, whichever a daisy this was, it could wait until he had space to consider it properly. That was reasonable. He told himself that was reasonable. He went back to the planning document. He read the same paragraph 4 times. He put the phone in the drawer. Not dramatically. He did not do things dramatically. He simply picked it up off the counter and placed it in the kitchen drawer, face down, next to the takeaway menus he never used, and went about his evening. He finished the planning document. He drafted 2 of the 3 emails and decided the third required more thought tomorrow. He read for 40 minutes, a book on infrastructure economics that was genuinely interesting and which absorbed him thoroughly for approximately 30 of those 40 minutes. Around 10:15, he cleaned up, turned off the lights, and went to bed. He slept fine. He always slept fine. In the morning, he took the phone out of the drawer and looked at the notification without opening the message. Grace Okafor, 6:48 p.m., unread. He set it aside. He had 6 flagged work messages from Therese waiting. He opened those first. By the time he had worked through them, the train of his morning was in motion. Calls, decisions, the forward velocity of a full working day, and the unread message from a number he didn't know was filed somewhere in the background. Not forgotten, just deprioritized. There was a difference. He told himself there was a difference. Something about it stayed. He noticed this on Wednesday afternoon, during a pause between meetings. He was standing at the window of the conference room, the one with the view of the construction site 2 blocks east, and his mind did what minds did in pauses. It returned to unfinished things. The name, Ades. He turned it over without intention. It wasn't a common name in his immediate world. He'd known exactly one person with that name, and she was, he calculated, easily 15 years in his past. A chapter of his life that had closed the way chapters closed when you were young and moving fast, and the next thing always seemed more immediate than the current one. He remembered her the way you remembered certain people, not in specific detail, but in texture, the quality of presence. She had been warm in a particular way, not effusively, but deeply, like someone who paid genuine attention to the people in front of her. He had not paid it back well. He knew that, in the way you knew things about your younger self that you didn't examine too closely. The meeting resumed. He went back to the table. He was present, focused, effective, all the things he always was. But underneath it, something that had no name yet was turning slowly. Thursday was a full day. He had a site visit at 7:30, which meant rising at 5 and being in the car by 6:45. The site was on the northern edge of the city, a former industrial plot they were converting, the kind of project that required constant physical presence because the variables on the ground never matched the variables on paper. He spent 4 hours there. Then back to the office for a sequence of internal meetings that ran until 5, followed by a call with a planning authority contact that took 40 minutes longer than expected because the contact had concerns he hadn't raised in email and needed time to articulate. By 7, he was home. He was tired in the productive way, the kind of tiredness that felt like a full account at the end of a day. He ate, he read briefly, he did not look at the personal phone until it was already late. The notification was still there. He looked at it. He did not open it. He set the phone face down and turned off the light. He lay in the dark. He thought about what Grace Okafor might have needed to say that required a message, not a call, a message, written, measured, careful. I'm not writing to cause any trouble. He stared at the ceiling. He did not sleep as easily as usual. Friday came and went. The message stayed unread. He was aware of it the way you were aware of a small stone in a shoe, not disabling, not constant, but present whenever attention wandered. He had developed, over the course of his career, an excellent ability to redirect wandering attention. He deployed it now. Saturday, he worked in the morning, caught up on the things the week had pushed aside. In the afternoon, he went for a run, a discipline he'd maintained for 20 years, the one consistent physical habit in a life of otherwise sedentary work. 6 kilometers, same route, same pace. He ran, and he did not think about the message. Or rather, He did, in the way that running always brought things up. The rhythm of it cleared the clutter and left only the things that were actually sitting there. Days. He hadn't been good to her. That was the plain version of it. He had been 29 and occupied entirely by his own ambition, and she had been someone he'd cared for in the limited and self-serving way he'd cared for most things then. When she left, or when he made leaving seem like the obvious option, which was how he would characterize it now with the honesty of middle age, he had moved on quickly. He had not thought about her much since. He was thinking about her now. The second mention came on Sunday. He was at lunch, something he did rarely, a scheduled thing with an old colleague named Bernard who had retired 2 years ago and remained the one person from his early career he stayed in contact with. They met quarterly. Bernard talked. Dominic listened. It was an arrangement that suited them both. Bernard was speaking about his daughter, some complication in her marriage, nothing dramatic. The ordinary difficulty of two people trying to stay coherent across the pressures of adult life. He was telling it as a father, with the specific helpless love that Dominic had observed in other men and had never experienced as a personal category. Somewhere in it, Bernard said the name, not a daze, a coincidence of syllable pattern, a similar sound. But Dominic's attention snagged on it with a sharpness that surprised him. Bernard noticed. "You all right?" "Fine," Dominic said. "Sorry, you were saying." Bernard continued. Dominic listened, but the part of him that had been running quietly in the background for 4 days was suddenly louder. Something about the name in the message had been trying to get his attention for days, and he had been declining to give it. He looked at his coffee. He thought about a woman named Grace who had introduced herself as Adazi's mother and said she hoped he'd read it. He drove home directly after lunch. He sat at his kitchen counter. The personal phone was in front of him. He had not taken it out of his jacket pocket with any ceremony. He had simply set it down the way he set things down, with precision and without performance. He looked at the notification. Grace Okafor, 6:48 p.m., Tuesday, 6 days ago. He thought about why he hadn't opened it. The honest answer was that he had sensed, without reading it, that it would require something from him. Not money. He wasn't afraid of that. Not legal complications. The timeline was too long ago for anything with those teeth. Something softer than that. Something he was less equipped for. He was a man who dealt in the concrete, buildings, numbers, contracts. The soft things, the relational things, the ones that arrived without structure or price and asked to be felt rather than managed, those he had always moved around. He was 58 days from 46. He had been moving around them for a long time. He picked up the phone. He held it. He thought about Adaez and about what he had been at 29 and about the way certain things looked different when you had enough distance to see their actual shape. He opened the message. He read it again from the beginning. The opening he already knew. But the message was longer than he'd seen in that first glance. He had only registered the first part, the introduction, the name, and set it aside. There was more. Adaeza spoke about you over the years. Not often, and not with bitterness. That was never her way. She carried things quietly, always. I think you knew that about her. I think it may be part of why things ended the way they did. He stopped. Read that again. I think it may be part of why things ended the way they did. Grace Okafor was not angry. He could feel that in every sentence. But she was precise. She was the kind of woman who chose words carefully and meant the ones she chose. He continued reading. She had a daughter. Her name is Chiamaka. She is 14 years old. Adaezi raised her alone. She didn't ask anything of you, and I want you to know she never spoke badly about your absence to the child. That was a decision she made, and she kept it. He set the phone down. He picked it up again. Chiamaka knows she has a father. She has always known. Adaez told her as much truth as was kind. I am writing to you now because Adaezi cannot write to you herself. He stopped breathing for a moment. He read the rest without stopping. Adaezi became ill 2 years ago. She fought it the way she fought everything, quietly and completely. She did not want anyone's pity, and she did not want Chiamaka to see her afraid, and she managed both of those things right up until she couldn't manage them anymore. She passed away 11 weeks ago. Chiamaka is with me now. She's a good child, a remarkable one, actually. She has her mother's way of carrying things, but she is 14 and she has lost her mother, and she knows her father is somewhere in the world, and I am 67 years old, and I cannot be what she needs for as long as she will need it. I am not asking you to do anything you are not capable of. I am asking you to read this. I am asking you to think about it carefully. And if you are the kind of man who can do right by a child who has already lost so much, then I am asking you to respond. She does not know I am writing to you. I will not tell her unless something comes of it. I have spent my life protecting her mother, and now I am trying to protect her. I hope you will read this. Grace. He set the phone down. The kitchen was completely quiet. He sat without moving for a long time. The words settled in him the way heavy things settled. Not crashing, sinking. Slowly, with the weight of their actual meaning. Adais had been ill for 2 years. She had died 11 weeks ago. She had raised a daughter, their daughter, alone, for 14 years, and she had not contacted him, and she had not spoken badly of his absence to the child. And she had done all of this quietly and completely, the way Grace had said, because that was who she was. He knew it was true before he verified anything. He knew it was true because it was entirely consistent with the person he remembered. Adais had never asked for things she felt she shouldn't have to ask for. She had had a way of deciding what was hers to carry and carrying it without announcement. He had mistaken that, once, for ease. He understood now, with the clarity that 15 years of perspective and 60 seconds of a message could produce, that it had not been ease at all. It had been strength. The particular strength of someone who had loved a person who was not yet capable of receiving it and had eventually, gently stopped. He put his hand flat on the counter. He looked at his own hand. He thought about 14 years, about a girl who had her mother's way of carrying things. He tried to calculate what 14 years meant. Not financially, he would come to that, but that was not what his mind went to first. He tried to calculate what 14 years of a child's life looked like when you had not been inside any of it. First words, first day at school, the specific crises of early childhood, illness, fear, the thousand small moments that added up to the shape of who a person became. He had missed all of it, not reluctantly, not watching from a distance. He had missed it without knowing it existed, which was in some ways worse, because he couldn't even say he had chosen. He had not been given the choice. Or, and this was the thought that arrived next and was harder to look at, he had been given a kind of choice long ago and had made it in the passive way that people made consequential choices when they failed to show up. Not a decision, an absence that became a decision. He had walked away from Adais at 29 because the next thing had seemed more urgent. He had not been cruel. He had not been intentional. He had simply been absent. And absence, extended long enough, became its own kind of act. He looked at the time, 8:12 in the evening, 11 weeks since Adais died. He picked up the phone. He typed the response twice before he was satisfied with it. The first version was too long, explanatory in a way that served him rather than her. He deleted it. The second was shorter. He read it back. Mrs. Okafor, I read your message. I'm sorry it took me this long. I can't justify that, and I won't try. I'm deeply sorry about Adais. Please believe that. I would like to talk if you're willing. Not to complicate anything, just to understand what you need and what I can do. You can call this number whenever is right for you. I will answer. Dominic. He sent it. He set the phone down. He stood up, walked to the window. The city below was doing its Sunday evening thing. Quiet, the pace changed, the light going amber. He had sent it. That was something. He waited for the relief that was supposed to follow, doing the right thing. It didn't arrive in any clean form. What arrived instead was the absence of the restlessness, the 6-day low-frequency noise of the unread message going silent, replaced by something more honest. Not peace. Accountability. His phone buzzed at 8:40. He picked it up immediately. It was not a reply from Grace. It was a message from a contact about a Monday meeting. He set the phone down. He waited. Grace Okafor called the next morning at 7:15. He answered on the second ring. Her voice was older than he'd imagined, warm but careful, the voice of someone who had been through something large and was still inside it. She thanked him for responding. He said there was nothing to thank him for. She told him more. Adaez had been diagnosed 26 months ago. She had continued working for the first year. She was a secondary school teacher, mathematics, which he hadn't known, and which produced a quiet surprise in him. She had managed the illness and the teaching and Chiamaka's life with the focus of someone determined that the normal things would keep being normal for as long as possible. The second year had been harder. Chiamaka knew her mother was ill. Adaez had told her the truth in appropriate increments, enough to prepare her, not enough to take her childhood before its time. "She is a very thoughtful child," Grace said. "She doesn't show everything she feels, but it's all there." He said, "She sounds like her mother." Grace was quiet for a moment. "Yes," she said, "she does." He asked what Chiamaka needed practically. School, stability, support. Grace was managing, but she was 67 and Chiamaka was 14, and there was a distance between those numbers that Grace had clearly already calculated. "What does she know about me?" he asked. Grace said, "That you exist, that your separation from her mother was long ago, nothing else." He asked Grace for time. Not much time, a week, he said. He needed a week to put certain things in order so that when he spoke to her next, he had answers, not just intentions. Grace said she understood. She sounded like she had been waiting long enough, that one more week was manageable. He spent the week thinking in the most rigorous way he knew. He was not a man who arrived at important decisions through feeling. He arrived through examination, turning a thing over until he understood its shape from every angle. He applied that now, except that this time the examination kept running into territory that feeling was better equipped for than analysis. He thought about Chiamaka, a 14-year-old girl who had watched her mother fight for 2 years and lose, who had her mother's way of carrying things. Who knew her father existed somewhere in the world and had been told enough truth to understand the shape of the situation without being given the specific weight of it. He thought about what he would have needed at 14 from an adult who had the capacity to show up. He thought about all the ways he had spent his capacity since then. He thought about a message that had sat unread in his phone for 6 days while he protected his routine. He thought about what too late actually meant. It did not mean finished. Not in this case. It meant behind. Behind by 14 years, and by 6 days, and by everything in between. But behind was still a position from which you could move. He called Grace back on Friday. He told her what he wanted to do, not as a demand, not as a takeover. As an offer, laid out clearly, with all the conditions she could add or revise. He would set up a trust for Chiamaka's education and future. He would be available, by phone, in person, at whatever pace Chiamaka was comfortable with. He would not insert himself into Grace's household or override her authority. This was her family, and he had forfeited the right to treat it as anything else. Grace listened to all of it. Then she said, "She asked me last week if I thought you would ever call." He closed his eyes briefly. "What did you tell her?" "I told her I had written to you and that you had responded and that I was hopeful." He said, "When can I speak to her?" A pause. "I'll ask her. She has a right to decide." "Of course." Another pause. "Dominic." Her voice had shifted slightly, not softer, but more direct. "She is a good person. Whatever she decides, please don't let it be the last time you try. Children in her position, they test. They need to see if the trying is real or if it stops when it becomes inconvenient." He thought about what he had been at 29. "It won't stop," he said. He meant it. For the first time in a very long time, he meant something completely. Chiamaka agreed to a call. Grace arranged it for Saturday morning. He was at his kitchen counter by 8:30. He had not slept heavily. He had not expected to. At 9 o'clock exactly, his phone rang. "Hello." Her voice was clear and steady and younger than the weight behind it. "Hello, Chiamaka. My name is Dominic." "I know," she said. A beat. "I'm sorry about your mother," he said. She was quiet for a moment. Then, "Did you know she was sick?" "No, I didn't know until your grandmother wrote to me." Another pause. He let her hold it. "She didn't want to tell you," Chiamaka said. "I asked her once if she was going to. She said she had thought about it, but she wasn't ready." He listened. "She talked about you sometimes," Chiamaka said. "Not a lot, but sometimes. She said you weren't a bad person. You were just someone who hadn't learned yet how to stay." He pressed his fingers against the counter. "She was right," he said quietly. "Are you different now?" Chiamaka asked. Not aggressively, just directly, the same way she had apparently asked everything. He thought about what honesty looked like in this moment. "I think I am," he said. "But I understand if that means nothing yet. I'd rather show you than ask you to believe it." She was quiet. "Okay," she said finally. "Just that." It was enough. He did not become someone else overnight. He understood that transformation of any real kind didn't work that way. He had spent his career watching people promise changes they hadn't built the internal architecture for, and he had too much respect for the process to pretend it was simpler than it was. But things shifted. The trust was set up within the month, handled quietly, structured properly, with Grace named as the managing trustee until Chiamaka turned 18. He told no one at work and did not speak about it. It wasn't a performance. He called Chiamaka every Saturday morning. The early calls were short and slightly careful, two people learning the particular distance between them and how to cross it without forcing. She asked questions when she had them. He answered them honestly, including the ones about her mother, including the ones about why things had gone the way they had. He did not make himself better than he'd been. She seemed to respect that. By the third month, the calls ran longer. She was studying for end-of-year examinations in mathematics, her mother's subject. She was excellent at it. He discovered he could help in the way that problems with clear solutions had always come easily to him. They worked through things together. That became its own language between them. He kept Grace's message, not in a folder, on his phone, in the thread where he could find it. "I hope you'll read this." He read it sometimes, not as punishment, as a reminder of what almost didn't happen.